Hey everybody, Sleepy Reader here. I'm going to do comic book thoughts on a few comics right here. I'll be turning around the camera in a minute. There will be spoilers, especially on the Immortal Hulk, since I'm going to be looking directly at the whole comic. And I have a lot of questions, so I just wanted to kind of air them. And spoilers on, what is it? If it can be spoiled. Legion Millennium. I finished the 2 issues and I thought I'd dive a little deeper on it. I'm kind of going to be complaining and whining, but I'm not complaining and whining about 2 people I want to shout out before I continue. Centauri Stir-Fry is back. He took a bit of a hiatus, not too long, but he's back talking about comics, perhaps weekly. I think he did one last week and he did this one this week. He's really fun to watch, funny guy and smart guy, and just good to hear his thoughts on the comics he gets. So I'll put a link below. And I also wanted to shout out, although I haven't finished it yet, Crypt of Castle Hills, Mike. Always a great channel, but he's done something special. He did a kind of Swamp Thing thought piece documentary, which is over an hour long, and I've gotten about 35 minutes into it, and I'm loving it. So I'm going to link that down below. Check that out when you have time to sit back and learn about the Swamp Thing and just relish the goodness that is the Swamp Thing. A perfect October video. Okay, so I'll be turning around the camera, and I will be discussing grumpily a few comics. There should hopefully be more comics thoughts to come as I read more, catch up more on my comics, and with the hope of eventually returning to the kind of weekly countdown that I was having fun doing a while ago. See you in a second. Actually, I'm still pretty happy with Shazam, mostly drawn by Dale Eaglesham, with very good script and whole sort of overarching story plot by Jeff Johns. So my only worry on this is it's coming out so slowly. What if they end up having to rush the ending, or get interrupted by some big event, or Jeff Johns moves to Marvel or something before he finishes it? But anyway, it's been great the way Johns extrapolated these 7 magic lands beyond the train station where Billy Batson goes and gets his power, originally went to get his power from Shazam. And so, for instance, here we've got the magic, the Wonderlands, which seem to be a cross between Alice in Wonderland and the Wizard of Oz kinds of stuff. Got kind of lots of interesting plot twists, like this old Shazam warrior wizard who may or may not be the real thing. The revelations going on in the, quote, real world between Billy Batson and his foster parents, and the complications in the wildlands with Tawny Tiger and the kids who've somehow lost their Shazam powers. I'm not sure how it's all going to... I mean, you can't see where Jeff Johns is going, but so far he seems very in control of his material and constantly retwisting the twists in ways that keep it interesting and fun. And all the characters are very solid and everything. So I love this Dale Eaglesham art, particularly when he's doing animals. Like, I just love that panel right there with the dog, Taylor, and the ostrich. But, so the only fear that I have is guest artists. So Scott Collins does the art at the end, and it just looks very sort of hasty and generic comic book art, and just does not have the charm. So I'm a bit surprised Dale Eaglesham doesn't have time to finish these comics up by himself, given how much time there is between each issue. But nevertheless, there's been a lot of substitute artists along the way, and this is the most sort of really noticeable, egregious one. It just is so far away from the style we've gotten used to. Hopefully Dale Eaglesham will be back in issue 8, hopefully doing the whole issue or part of the issue. But anyway, it's a good comic. I guess I just like to worry. Bronze Age Boogie was something I was kind of promoting as one of my favorite sort of guilty pleasure, fun kind of comics. Here's issue 5 and 6. 6 is the finale. And the plot just got looser and looser and more vague as we went on, so that by the wrap up of the actual time travel fighting Martians adventure at the end, I was just left feeling, bleh. I don't really care about this anymore at all. So I can no longer really recommend people run out and buy Bronze Age Boogie in trade or back issue bins particularly. It's not horrible, and it was kind of a fun journey, but it's not great. It didn't really live up to the potential of its first 3 or 4 issues. And even worse, the art is still cool. The color's cool. But even more egregious, if I can find it, as these text pages have gotten worse. Just really badly laid out. What's in them, it takes a lot of effort to read and figure out what they're talking about and what is the important information they're trying to give you here. It's always bad reading in text when there's huge amounts of capital letters. Why they couldn't use a comic book font and mix them around with pictures the way they might have done in an old Bronze Age comic. I was always annoyed when Don McGregor would do this kind of thing anyway, but when he did it, it was not nearly as bad as what they're doing here, as lazy. There's a sense of laziness as we come towards the end of this comic, and the explanations for things feel lazy, and well, definitely those text pages, and then just the way the whole plot is wrapped up again in the end. I think I'm going to spoil it. So basically, there's a guy named God, or an entity named God, who comes to them and explains a lot of stuff. There's God, and somehow by shattering a gem, they were going to stop, but instead it didn't stop, releasing these elder Martians. But when the elder Martians arrive, I guess they're not being controlled by the younger Martians, and they eat the younger Martians, and then decide they've had enough fighting and eating, so they're not going to bother the humans anymore, and they go off to rest back to their cosmic prison. And that's it. Now, there is kind of a fun wrap-up after the wrap-up of the plot, where our monkey character gets reinstated as a kind of time agent and gets a better position, negotiating with this female simian. I don't know where she comes from, or I can't remember if we've been introduced to this time-traveling VW bus before. But then there's kind of a fun scene in a disco, an odd moment where we see Lee has a male lover, even though before he seemed to have eyes for our African-American character. But then this also fun kind of teaser for a potential next adventure, which is one of those things you don't even have to read. It's just kind of fun to think they're going to go off on their next adventure with Wake Lovelost Space Pirate, who needs help in the 69th century. And I did enjoy this kind of Bronze Age. Start saving those shekels now for the Bronze Age king-size special featuring Rake Lovelost. Maybe, if there's still a comics industry left by the bicentennial. Till then, peace out, broke Bronze Agers. So that was very cool. It's very hard for me to go from comic book reading to text reading. I need a break between. So when the text is included in the comic book story itself, I find that very hard. Like in Alan Moore's Watchmen, at the end, there would be text pieces at the end. I'd read it, then I would come back to the comic and read the text pieces. In these Ahoy comics have a lot of short stories at the end, which have been often good, and I've often come back to read them, but I never read them the moment after I finish reading the comic. I definitely need that changing of gears. So I still feel good about Ahoy comics in general and the quality. These covers, just if you're touching them with your fingers, they feel wonderful. It's very high quality stuff. It's nice the way they do these back covers without the logos, so you can see the whole artwork. But yeah, it just was a story where the writer seemed to get lazy at the Speaking of writers, this is the Vampirella series, which is now up to issue 3, written by Christopher Priest, a kind of unique writer in comic books, I think. And this is a perfect example of how he's just kind of an odd writer, but in a good way for the most part. The story here is Vampirella's recounting how she ended up in a plane crash to the psychologist who's been provided to her by the airplane company to get her over her PSD. So the psychologist, of course, thinks she's deluded in all her stories about being from another planet. And what was I going to say? And in these 2 issues, it's revealed how she works with this kind of death squad of nuns who goes after demons. It's just kind of fun, wacky stuff. It's funny that it's very sexual, lots of violence. But the one thing I've noticed, is no matter how much they show, they will never show you nipples throughout these comics. And yet, on the cover, I would swear they're showing us the nipples there. What's with that? So that's my little nipple footnote. But the thing is, actually, by issue 3, I was sort of bored now with these stories of fighting demons. And I was thinking, well, maybe I will drop the comic. Until in the middle of her therapy session with this therapist, who I still think is probably a stand-in for Christopher Priest himself, who I know is an African-American man, who's probably about the age that this therapist looks. Her mother just suddenly shows up in the therapist's office, and she just, by hypnotism, gives the therapist a heart attack. And that really got my attention. So now I'm all interested. I don't know how much of this is what things look like on Draculon, I guess. So it's almost like they've redone this Vampirella story to be origin to kind of be like Wonder Woman's, where an Earthling or a man comes to the island or to the planet, and Vampirella or Wonder Woman wants to save him, so takes him back to man's world or to Earth. Now, doesn't quite jibe with how her mother's kind of like an evil queen who's tried to take over Earth several times, I think, from this. So I don't know how much. There's just a huge amount of back history of Vampirella stories, so I don't know how much of this is original to Christopher Priest, if he's making it up on the spot or going into some, deep continuity about the current Vampirella. But anyway, the mother really livens things up, and so I'm really interested to see where that was going. Now, we did end with more, excuse me, where is the picture? Oops, I missed it. More demon nun death squad stuff, which I feel already bored by, even though it's kind of this cool image that is shocking. So there you go. I'm not dropping it yet anyway. I'm very embarrassed by this cover because it's just, I don't know, the blood and the sexuality, and I do not want my wife, and especially not my daughter, to see this cover. And speaking of stuff that they would not want to see and that I myself am not really enjoying seeing is the gore in Coffin Bound. There's 2 very gory scenes in this issue. The first issue had a stripper who peeled off her own skin to expose the muscles and stuff as part of her striptease act. Muscles and organs. I found that kind of gross. This is definitely a horror comic book. It's a post-apocalyptic comic. I don't understand this post-apocalyptic world. This woman, whose name I've forgotten, our main character, is Coffin in her name? I don't know. She is on the run. People are trying to kill her. I think she's some kind of master assassin. She has a boyfriend or girlfriend named Cassandra, who you can't tell their sex. She does have nipples, though. Anyway, it's a wonderfully drawn and colored comic. It's intriguing. There's the character who saws off all her or his limbs just for fun or reasons. But I'm kind of thinking, I don't need to have, even if a story is good, I don't have to read gory. I like horror comics, but after a point, the gore just kind of gets me down. So I think I'm going to drop this. But the next issue comes out this coming Wednesday, and I feel bad dropping it just as my comic book store is getting in my copy. So I will drop it after next Wednesday. I will get issue 3. I suppose there's a chance issue 3 will turn things around for me, because along with the gore, everything's well written and cool scenes, but I'm not really getting this comic. That there's too much vagueness about why people are trying to kill her and who she is and what this world is and what the meaning of all of it is. But I guess some of our main bad guys are people who go around harvesting body parts that as they try to Frankenstein themselves into the perfect body. One of the cool things, though, is this weird character that follows her around that may or may not be an imaginary character, but seems to be able to have some effect on the real world. And if she has a ghoulish bird skeleton imaginary character, and the bird skeleton, the skull part is inside a cage, following her around, then what's her deal? Why is she so psychologically warped? Oh, here's her mask that kind of looks like a bird character. So I don't know what that's about. Okay, onwards. We got the Legion of Superheroes from Brian Michael Bendis and a ton of different artists. They appeared in this issue of Superman very prominently, asking Superboy to come with them. And then we get this odd time travel journey through Millennium 1 and Millennium 2, following Rose and Thorn, of the old Rose and Thorn Bronze Age character, the split personality person, Rose being a nice girl and Thorn being a really tough vigilante, following them through 1,000 years of DC history until they reach the moment where the Legion is first formed. Even though in this one, Brian Michael Bendis presents us with an already formed Legion that's inviting Superboy to join. In this one, the Legion has just formed. I mean, I'm sure there's an explanation around all this, but the Legion has just formed, and Superboy's there already and their very first inaugural meeting, if I understand things correctly. And at their very first inaugural meeting, Rose of Rose and Thorn is walking up to talk to them and says she has a great deal to share with them. There's no plot to this Millennium book other than Rose and Thorn are traveling through time. Not traveling through time. They are immortal, and they are living through all these centuries. And we get a little scene of them in a bunch of different eras. Many of the eras, if you're a long-time DC kind of person, you'll recognize. Some of the eras I did not recognize, and I wasn't sure if they were ones made up by Bendis as fillers or if they were real parts of the DC universe that I just wasn't able to catch the clues for. But that makes me think that this two-part Millennium, if some poor schmo who didn't know much about Legion of Superheroes or DC Comics, the deep end of DC Comics history, just picked these up and thought, well, I'd like a 2-issue story about the Legion of Superheroes. They get nothing here, and they get no explanation and no sense to it. It is kind of a cool science fiction idea to follow a immortal character through ages of time. There's this great Poul Anderson book called The Boat of a Million Years that does just that, follows a variety of characters who are immortal, just genetic oddities who are immortal over thousands and thousands of years, and he gives different scenes in their lives as their lives move closer and closer together before they all end up on a space arc that goes off into space. But it's not a story here, and Rose is not really changing or anything other than getting grumpy. And she also seems, well, she does change in the sense that sometimes she seems like superpowered, and other times they actually state she doesn't have superpowers. I mean, here she's battling several supervillains single-handedly. She'd at very least have super strength, if not invulnerability. And then, like in the Batman Beyond universe, she's ultra-violent person who blasts holes through people's heads constantly. Talk about more violence than one actually wants. Not that it's that gory, but still. Definitely too dark to read with my sister. When she's in the world of Commandy, which somehow just comes right after Batman Beyond, I guess. And for those who don't know, in Commandy, basically most humans have died. A few remnants of humanity are there without any intellect or barely any sentience even, except for one boy, Commandy, and a few mutants like Ben Boxer. And luckily, we get Rose coming along and just like cutting off people's heads. Well, the person is a sentient ape. At least she doesn't kill Commandy. But it doesn't really track or make sense. Then we get this other future that I thought was drawn in a really cool way. It reminded me, the artwork here reminded me of the artist in Ice Cream Man. And it also had a bit of a Mobius look, but I don't know who the artist is. Next stop, Legion, but issue 2 is just more the same, going through different time periods. It's kind of fun. She goes to this exhibit about superheroes. I thought at first, okay, so this is in the 30th century where they worship superheroes, so they form the Legion to recreate the Age of Superheroes. But no, Rose actually meets someone who is Booster Gold, we realize. So we've had an encounter with Booster Gold, and then Rose moves on to the world of OMAC. OMAC comes after Commandy? Well, anyway, this whole world full of people comes after Commandy when the humanity's been wiped out, and what happened to all the animals? But anyway, Rose is like as tough as Commandy. Sorry, not as tough as OMAC. It just feels sloppy. It's like I'm just going to throw her in these different situations, and I don't really have any other idea except that eventually I thought there was going to be something that would show in her journey at least. I didn't care that Bendis would do it, but that he was going to show her journey and how all these different DC futures tie in together and one lead into another. But there's no connective tissue, so even that purpose doesn't exist. This is our new Earth. Is this the Earth where the Legion of Superheroes exists? It's been sliced up, and then little pieces of it are like in little habitats. That's just weird. But that seems to be it. Cool artwork, cool visionary science fiction visuals, and there's the Legion of Superheroes. And as it says, the story is to be continued in the Legion of Superheroes. There's nothing you might have enjoyed the journey. I just felt frustrated by it, but there's nothing you need in here to know about the Legion of Superheroes as far as I can tell, and no real hints as to what it's all about, just in terms of all the DC future history. So I just wanted to gripe about that. So thank you for putting up with my complaints. Ending on a high note, but I will spoil this. The Immortal Hulk continues to live up to my high expectations for it. Although I continue to be nervous, like where's it going to go? I guess I've just heard someone say the next issue, number 25, is going to be an oversized one that will cost more and have more pages. And my immediate thought are all those pages going to be drawn by our current artist, Joe Bennett? Or is it just going to be a regular Joe Bennett story and some filler, or no Joe Bennett at all? But Joe Bennett is just rocking it here. And I have to warn you, this one also has a lot of gruesome stuff. Now, I guess it does show I'm willing to put up with the gruesome stuff in the Hulk because the story is so good and it fits so well. But I do have moments where, like, well, I'm particularly worried my daughter might stumble across these pictures and have nightmares. But anyway, it looks like we're wrapping up our story about Fortean and his dark his sort of black ops operation. And that's done very well. There's this weird surreal scene where Fortune goes to this hellscape that we've been going to every once in a while. I don't completely understand it. I hope there's more revelations about it. I half understand it. It might be like the Hulk and other people with gamma radiations, sort of personal hell, or it might be a gateway, just a gamma radiated gateway to hell. Anyway, I'm not sure. But then we have this whole other thing that's laid on top of it, which kind of fits the idea of this Devil Hulk gaining its power, but it's kind of complicated to explain. So we had that early scene with, is his name Galen, I believe? Galen of Ta, who is the person from a previous universe before our own in the cycle of universes, who at the destruction of his universe became what we now know of as Galactus, and was kind of seeded into our universe and is going around, as far as I know, and I don't know what the total current continuity is, but my understanding of Galactus is he's going around eating worlds, but the ultimate goal of his eating worlds is that he will have this power to do something at the end of our universe that's important. I can't remember what that thing is. But we've added in this idea, or maybe it's already been there and I just didn't know about it, that there is some life force that bonded with Galen to create Galactus. And now that life force wants to bond with the only remaining, it's the end of our universe, and the only remaining living thing is this weird Bruce Banner cadaver. Who this person is, though, I'm not sure. Is that the remains of Galactus Galen? I don't think so. So in other words, I was very puzzled, although, Galen does not have blonde hair or anything like that. So who's this blonde-haired person with the remains of an outfit? I can't quite recognize that outfit. So then we get this really wild stuff of Bruce Banner Hulk swallowing up this energy force that was what made Galactus Galactus, I guess. And that's the end. So we're given a vision of a future where that somehow this Devil Hulk has to do with the end of all things and the devouring of all power. But we also have this cool thing where Hulk is now taken over the Black Ops base for his own use. So that part of me has me really excited. The cosmic stuff was cool, but kind of out of left field a little bit, and makes me worried that I'm still worried that at some point this will jump the shark, that Al Ewing might bite off more than he can chew, and talk about how much you can chew. But maybe what we're seeing here is the ultimate evil goal of the Devil Hulk and the kind of united Hulk personalities that he says is now involved as he begins his Black Op operations of his own. Yeah, so this is kind of complicated and a little bit mystifying, but all in a good way so far. I assume it'll eventually be resolved and Hulk won't remain permanently the destroyer of the universe for the Marvel Universe. When the universe is destroyed in this flash forward, I don't know how far ahead in time it is. Is it the natural end of the universe? You've been baptized in the energies of creation, and now we too will work to become a new form of life. As Galen of Ta was the seventh and the eighth, the devourer, the Galactus, you shall be the ninth. You and I will merge. So who is this? Is this some entity we've seen before and I just have missed it? So anyway, crazy, interesting, wild stuff. Al Ewing's imagination is a big one, and his intelligence it feels like a very intelligent comic despite gore and horror and over-the-top action, and I love that combination of things. Okay, guys, I thought this would be a quick one, and it's not. So I apologize for that, but everyone who's listened to the end, thank you very much. I will be back soon.